Travel agencies cut costs to stay afloat as a government support scheme ends in about a month. One locally acquired COVID-19 case in the city. And in France, 3 dead as a woman is beheaded in a knife attack. Good evening and welcome. The tourism industry is asking for more government help as a global pandemic serves a huge blow to the sector.
A local travel agency that is losing $1 million a month will stop paying its staff and instead will put the positions on retainer.
With border controls and quarantine measures in effect since the start of the COVID era, travel agencies have had little to no tour groups operating. Sunflower Travel Agency informed its employees yesterday that it will stop paying them but retain their positions starting in December. Other travel agencies around town do not have plans yet to do the same, but some are reducing costs by rolling out no-pay leave schemes for their employees. The Travel Industry Council chief explains how these temporary measures relieve the agency's burden.
And the subsidy program for employees ends in November. Most agents may not have sufficient income to afford the salaries. The new employment agreement perhaps may help the travel agents to keep the employees while allowing them to perhaps change the other short-term job outside or to change the job nature, which might help to keep the relationship between the employees and the travel agents. Once the border reopen again or more travel bubbles is being established, perhaps the travel guys may come back to the industry to help build up the momentum again.
Meanwhile, it's business as usual in the Sunflower Travel Agency's Mong Kok branch. A staff member told us that most employees have accepted the agency's arrangement. Ms. Kwok has been a supervisor at the branch for 6 years. She noted the company has allowed its workers to pick up part-time jobs outside of work since March. Kwok is coping with the situation and considers the current option better than directly laying off staff. She also said her colleagues understand the company's decision because it's hard for them to switch to jobs in other industries. Sunflower noted it was a tough decision to make and will compensate employees who do not agree with the new arrangement.
A survey by the Hong Kong Institute of Human Resource Management shows local employees' average pay increase this year has hit a 10-year low of 1.4%.
And over 60% of the companies interviewed remain undecided on whether there will be a pay hike next year. Dong Yang Nie has more details.
Those who are looking forward to their annual salary increase may be disappointed this time round. The Hong Kong Institute of Human Resource Management surveyed about 100 companies in 15 sectors during the first 9 months of the year, covering more than 120,000 full-time workers. It found the average pay raise has hit a decade low of 1.4%. Over 3 in 10 companies have had their staff pay frozen, a significant increase from last year. Still, the overall pay raise is higher than in 2003 and 2004 under the impact of SARS.
When compared to the situations or in SARS, Hong Kong company or organization have a better experience in managing crisis. And also, they are more upskilled in terms of the technology, so it helps a lot.
Even with tighter budgets, bosses can show their staff they're valued in other ways. The organization suggests some people-centric measures, like increased interaction and flexible work hours.
More two-way communication to engage the employee, making sure they understand what's going on, what will happen. A lot of organizations, they are implementing more, family-friendly practices, especially for those working parents.
While all industries saw lower pay increases this year, the situation varies in different sectors. Those in retail and trading industries received the lowest salary raise, while the banking sector offered the highest pay increase this year. The institute explains banks may have benefited from digital technology like online banking and virtual funding events to stay afloat. And a downbeat estimate for next year, an average 1.7% pay rise, as the majority of the employers remain uncertain about next year's plan. Most of the companies surveyed are receiving the government's employment subsidy. But as the scheme is ending soon, the institute warns the overall unemployment rate may further surge and even reach double digits early next year. Dong Yaonie, TVB News.
Hong Kong reported 3 new cases of COVID-19, including a locally acquired infection. The local infection involves a 50-year-old woman who resides at Lok Man San Chun in To Kwa Wan. She is linked to a 42-year-old man who was previously found to be infected with the virus. Both worked at Siu Ying Commercial Building in Sheung Wan. The 2 imported cases reported today include a 33-year-old woman who arrived from Germany and a 52-year-old woman from the U.S.
The governments of France and Germany have imposed full-scale and partial lockdowns in a bid to clamp down on rising daily COVID-19 counts.
Such measures have, however, proved far from popular in other parts of Europe. Daniel Rao has more on the continent's fight to control the spread of the coronavirus.
Europe is facing an unprecedented spike in COVID-19 cases. The World Health Organization says the region accounted for almost half of the 2.8 million new coronavirus infections reported globally over the past week. In response, many nations are re-implementing tough curbs on public life. In France, President Emmanuel Macron implemented a new month-long nationwide lockdown on Wednesday. The move came after 520 coronavirus-related deaths were reported in the country on Tuesday, in addition to 36,437 new infections. All bars, restaurants, and non-essential businesses must now close by Friday. During his address, Macron also urged his countryfolk to remain indoors as much as possible. 58% of France's intensive care units are now occupied by COVID-19 patients. The nation's death toll stands at 35,785, the 7th highest in the world. In Germany, officials agreed to enforce a 4-week shutdown of restaurants, bars, cinemas, theaters, and other leisure facilities. Public gatherings will also be limited. The measures will take effect next Monday. Germany set a single-day record with 14,964 new reported infections on Wednesday. The country's cumulative case total stands at 464,239. Including 10,183 deaths. Elsewhere, Italy recorded a record high 25,000 new confirmed coronavirus cases on Wednesday, along with 205 more deaths. Protests, many of which have been violent, are ongoing in various regions of Italy in response to local curfews. Daniel Rao, TVB News.
At least 3 people were killed and several others injured in a knife attack at a church in the French city of Nice. One of the victims was reportedly beheaded. The city's mayor described the incident as terrorism. The knife-wielding attacker was heard shouting Allahu Akbar, meaning God is great in Arabic. The suspect was shot by police while being detained. The incident comes within days of the killing of a French school teacher, Samuel Paty. Paty was beheaded near Paris after he used caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad in a class on freedom of expression. Muslims consider showing the cartoons as blasphemous.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Democratic rival Joe Biden are set to converge on the critical battleground state of Florida as they make their cases to voters.
Florida, with its 29 electoral votes, is a major prize in the race. It is seeing Americans cast early ballots at a record-breaking pace.
More than 73 million Americans have already voted, absentee or by mail, ahead of the November 3rd election. Trump and Biden are trying to energize the millions more who will vote in person on Tuesday. Biden framed his closing arguments to voters on responsible management of the coronavirus pandemic, which has killed more than 227,000 Americans.
Even if I win, it's going to take a lot of hard work to end this pandemic. I'm not running on the false promise of being able to end this pandemic by flipping a switch. But what I can promise you is this. We will start on day one doing the right things.
Trump spent Wednesday in Arizona, where relaxed rules on social distancing made staging big rallies easier. With COVID-19 death rates climbing in 39 states and shockwaves rippling through financial markets, Trump instead railed against recent polling, showing Biden with a growing edge.
I get a poll. ABC, Washington Post, they're fakes. Trump, 17 down in Wisconsin. 17. Think of it. And they tried it last time 4 years ago, too, and that didn't work out too well. It's just unbelievable how dishonest the media is.
The candidates are in Florida next, a state all but essential to the Republicans' pathway to another term. Trump and Biden will appear in Tampa hours apart on Thursday. Trump is banking on local news coverage of his visit to overcome reduced advertising stemming from a late cash crunch. Biden and his allies are outspending Trump and his backers by more than 3-1 in Florida in the final push to Election Day.
The U.S. Supreme Court, meanwhile, has rejected a request by President Donald Trump's campaign to block North Carolina's extension of the deadline for receiving mail-in ballots. The justices, with their new colleague Amy Coney Barrett remaining on the sidelines, left in place a lower court-approved agreement allowing the extension. The state election board, citing potential U.S. Postal Service mail delivery delays, opted to allow absentee ballots postmarked by Election Day to be counted if they arrived up to 9 days later. The decision was a second setback for Republicans after the justices earlier declined to fast-track a decision on whether to hear a Republican bid to block an extended mail-in ballots deadline in Pennsylvania. Both states are considered pivotal to Trump's re-election chances. The U.S. Justice Department is charging a group of people for their roles in a Chinese harassment plot on American soil. The FBI calls it another example of China's ongoing and widespread lawless behavior.
There was no immediate response from the Chinese embassy in Washington. Peter Cavallos reports.
The U.S. Justice Department charged 8 people with working on behalf of the Chinese government in a pressure campaign. 5 people were arrested Wednesday, while the rest are believed to be in China. The alleged plot was known as Operation Fox Hunt and Operation Skynet.
With today's charges, we have turned the PRC's Operation Fox Hunt on its head. The hunters became the hunted, the pursuers the pursued.
Its apparent goal was to target Chinese nationals living in foreign countries and intimidate them into returning to China to face charges.
Without coordination with our government, China's repatriation squads enter the sovereign territory of the United States, surveil and locate the alleged fugitives, and deploy intimidation and other tactics to force them back into China, where they would face certain imprisonment or worse following illegitimate trials.
In this case, prosecutors said the defendants harassed the family of a man they did not identify who had been a city government official in China before arriving in the U.S. in 2010. Officials would not say why the man or his family was targeted, but authorities said the campaign to get him to return to China included surveillance and online harassment of the man's adult daughter, as well as a threatening note left on his front door. The note, written in simplified Chinese characters, said, "If you're willing to go back to the mainland and spend 10 years in prison, your wife and children will be all right. That's the end of this matter."
Today's charges reflect yet another example of China's ongoing and widespread lawless behavior and our refusal to tolerate it.
The arrests are among a series of recent actions the Trump administration has taken against China, a country President Donald Trump regards as a prime adversary. In July, for instance, the Justice Department charged hackers working with the Chinese government with targeting firms developing vaccines for the coronavirus and stealing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of intellectual property and trade secrets from companies across the world. Peter Cavallos, TVB News.
The 19th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China concluded their 5th plenary session in Beijing. A session adopted the proposals for the formulation of the 14th five-year plan for the national economic and social development and the long-range objectives through the year 2035. The committee acknowledged the international situation is getting more complicated with increasing uncertainties. The session also stressed the need to maintain the long-term prosperity and stability of Hong Kong and Macau. Lau Su-kai, vice president of the think tank, believes Beijing may consider giving out sweeteners to the SAR.
Because the national security law has already played a role in promoting Hong Kong's stability and reducing Hong Kong's threat to the country. So the focus from now on is how to help Hong Kong recover economically and to bring Hong Kong more integrated into the Chinese economy and to promote Hong Kong people's identification with the country, particularly among the younger people.
And still to come on tonight's news. The founder of a pro-independence group appears in court to face charges, including secession. 2 Mark 6 lottery draws per week starting November 10th. And in Australia, scientists discover a detached coral reef taller than Empire State Building.
Welcome back to TVB News. The founder and former convener of the pro-independence group Student Localism appeared in court this morning to face 4 charges, including secession and money laundering. Kana Chu reports.
Brought to the West Kowloon Magistrates Courts on board a police van this morning, Tony Chung is the second person in the city to be prosecuted under the new national security law. On Tuesday, officers of the Police National Security Unit arrested the 19-year-old in Central near the U.S. Consulate General. Reports said he was hoping to seek political asylum from the U.S. Chung faces a total of 4 charges, including secession under the Beijing-imposed law, which was enacted just an hour before the 23rd anniversary of the city's handover to China. During July 1st to October 27th, he allegedly organized, planned, committed, or participated in acts with a view to commit secession or undermine national unification. He is also charged with 2 counts of money laundering that purportedly took place from January 2018 to July this year. Using his personal HSBC and PayPal accounts, Chung is said to have handled nearly $700,000 believed to represent the proceeds of an indictable offense. The final charge involves 1 count of conspiracy to publish seditious materials, which falls under a colonial-era law. Prosecutors asked for the case to be adjourned to allow further probes into Chung's digital devices, social media posts, and monthly bank statements. Chief Magistrate Victor So adjourned the case until January 7th. He denied the defendant bail by reason of Article 42 of the National Security Law. It states no bail shall be granted unless the magistrate has sufficient grounds for believing that the defendant will not continue to commit acts endangering national security. Kana Chu, TVB News.
Volunteers who run an animal shelter in Ta Kwu Ling may be forced to close the facility because they are using the plot of land illegally. The shelter's operator said they were prosecuted last September for violation of land use. The 4 owners were fined more than $200,000. They were also asked to turn the plot back into farmland. Those in charge of the shelter stressed they will not take in more animals.
The Hong Kong Jockey Club will be holding 2 Mark 6 lottery draws per week starting November 10th. The draws will be held every Tuesday and Friday. The Jockey Club will also open 19 off-course betting branches on race days starting Sunday to provide betting and customer services. There will be no live video broadcasts at betting halls, although audio will be provided.
Australian scientists have discovered on the Great Barrier Reef a detached coral reef that exceeds the height of the Empire State Building. The scientists filmed their mission using an underwater robot while collecting marine samples for further study.
But there was no hint that this newly discovered 500-metre tall reef existed until we came there. So we know that the base of it is around 1.5 kilometres long. It's nearly exactly 500 metres tall, so it's far higher than Sydney Tower or the Eiffel Tower, or the Empire State Building. We've found new fish species, new black coral species. We have been taking samples with the ROV because it has a hand, and we have a permit from the Marine Park that allows us to collect these rare corals. So very healthy coral ecosystem on this top of a 500-metre tall reef. It's not something you discover every day, and in fact, it's the first detached reef of that size to be found in over 120 years.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.